Well, welcome back to another one of our studies in Philippians. Today we're looking at Philippians 4:10 through 13. So follow along as I read. I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you have renewed your concern for me. Indeed, you have been concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content in whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. Well, Paul is kind of summarizing his situation as he reaches the end of this letter to the Philippians. And he says some really lovely things to the Philippians, starting with these verses. And one of the nice terms he uses there in the first line is that he says, at last you have renewed your concern for me. Well, behind me, you see tulips. Tulips are what we call bulb plants. They are, rather than planted with seeds, there's little bulbs and you put them in the ground and they grow. And these bulb plants, the flowers don't last all year. They last for just a short time, usually in the spring. And they spring up very quickly, and then they flower and they bloom. And they're really quite beautiful. And there's daffodils and lilies and so on that are all part of this family of plants. Well, when Paul used this term renewed, he was saying that your renewal was like these plants that spring up and they flower in a wonderful, beautiful way, as they had the previous year. And he said, that's what you're concerned for. It's been renewed. It's like this flowering plant. It's really quite a lovely term that he uses here. And then he does a lovely thing in telling them, as much as he appreciates that he's really in a good place. And it's not, again, remember, he's in prison. He's awaiting his death sentence. And he's telling them, I'm okay. It's really quite fantastic, especially when we have the current climate in our cultures of, I want to do better, I want more, I want to have this and that and the other. Anyway, well, let me just stay with the verses. He says, I am glad you've shown your concern, but I'm not really in need. I've learned to be content. And that word content has the idea of being complete, or being self-reliant. He's saying that within what the Lord has done for me, in me, right here, I don't need anything from the outside. I have everything I need by what the Lord does to sustain me. That's enough. And he goes on to talk about the different extremes. He says, I know what it is to be in need. I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned to be content in every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. By nature, God has made us in such a way that we are kind of competitive. He did that so that when our ancestors were still having to fight wild animals a lot of the time, that we and there was limited food sources, that we could go after those and so on. And he put that in us. And we see that in sports, that competitive spirit where we're going to try to run faster or perform better or whatever. And also can be seen in things like music, where we want to play our instruments better or sing better or whatever. The idea is we have in us this desire to do more. And it's something that God, placed in us. And it was partly for our survival, but also partly so that we could give the very best that we have. The problem is that sometimes that good thing that God gave us, God put it into our hearts, can be used incorrectly. And we just want for the purpose of having, not because we need it, not because it's good for us, but because it's there and we think we must have it. And so we seek it, and we actually believe that if we obtain that, if we get that something that we're after, that's going to supply us and keep us happy, and we'll be all right. But we find that that's just not the case. The person who becomes a millionaire wants to have a second million. And the person who has a nice home a lot of times looks at a bigger home. The person with a nice car wants a nicer car. It doesn't seem to end. There just is this desire for more and more and more. And what Paul is saying here is that that's not the way he is right now. He said he's had it all. He's had where he had, things were going his way and so on, and he had plenty. And then he's had it where he didn't have anything. And actually, if we think about this, sometimes it's harder to have plenty than it is to be in want. The problem with plenty is you want to hold on to it, and you think about how I can hold on to it and how I can increase it and so on. Whereas when you have little, a lot of times you appreciate the smaller things and you don't overlook them. And you say, well, I had a good meal. That was a good meal. That was really marvelous. And then you're okay. Well, Paul is, of course, basing this upon his relationship with Christ. In fact, that last sentence he says there is very important. He says, I can do everything through him who gives me strength. Now, that's a verse that's often taken out of context. And people use that for all sorts of things. They use it for kind of like a vitamin pill for their spiritual life. They say, if I can do all things through Christ. And what they mean is, I can almost have all things through Christ. I can get all things through Christ. And that's not what Paul's saying. He's saying that in the circumstances I'm in, whether I have a lot or a little, whether things are going well, or I'm wondering how I'm going to live the next 5 minutes. He's saying, whatever that circumstance is, God has taught me through his strength that I can handle that situation, and still maintain being content, being feeling that I'm complete in Christ. And too often it's people saying, I want to have more. I can have the strength like a Superman kind of thing, rather than saying it's the power to be content where we are with what we have, with little or with nothing. It is certainly a countercultural kind of message when we especially see it with those who preach the prosperity gospel, that if you're a Christian, you can become wealthy and you can you'll be healthy and you'll have everything that you could ever want. It becomes kind of like a blank check that you can write on God's account, and you'll have every earthly blessing that you could possibly have. And that's not at all what Paul is saying. That's not what Paul has found from his own life. In many ways, he had that, and he found there was not contentment there. There wasn't completeness there. The completeness he found was in Christ, and knowing that. Now, to a lot of people, this is similar to the Stoics. Now, the Stoics taught that you just eliminate all earthly needs, and so you say, I don't need a house, or I don't need a job, I don't need my cat, and so you lose those things, and then you don't mourn them, you don't grieve them, and until finally you say, even if my spouse dies, I don't grieve because I'm all complete within myself. Well, that was a teaching in Greek philosophy, and Paul's not saying that at all. He's not saying that we don't feel the loss of those things. We don't grieve. I mean, we're going to grieve, and we're going to be disappointed, and we're going to feel. When he says I know what it is to be in want, he means I felt the hunger pangs. I have felt the need. I felt, I know I've lost things, but he says, in Christ, I know that I can handle that. I can get through that. I can manage that because he is giving me the strength to do so. So when you look at your life, at where you are right now, can you say that you're content? Can you say that you have found in Christ all that you need? And if the Lord never gave you one more thing, that you would say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, with what I have, where I am, and whatever is coming at me next. Can you say that? He wants us to be in that place. He wants us to be so complete in him that Those other things are nice. And listen, if you're hungry and someone offers you a meal, eat the meal. It's not saying you deny yourself. When something can happen, it doesn't mean that if you are sick that you don't try to get better. That's not what he's saying. He's saying, if I have to be sick, if I have to be hungry, I can still be complete in Christ. I can still be content. I can still find the strength for that situation if that's where I am. And so this is how we find out if we're mature in the Christian life, if we find ourselves there. Listen, nobody owes us anything. Nobody owes you anything. Nobody owes me anything. And if you go through life thinking someone should have done this for you or that for you, or they owe you this or they owe you that, or life should have been better here, and if those people don't have done this, and if my parents have been better, or whatever, all you're going to do is be a miserable sot, and nobody's going to want to be around you. If you find your satisfaction in Christ, you'll find that's the answer. And Paul's saying to the Philippians, I found this. I found the strength to be this way through Christ. And may you do so as well. God bless you.